Alright everyone, now we have confirmation from what I would consider to be, in this case, a reliable source, which is Giuliani himself, Rudy Giuliani, in the Hunter Biden email case, claiming that there was underage material indeed on Hunter Biden's laptop. I believe it because immediately the left-wing media, led by the Daily Beast and others, ran an immediate damage control campaign, which means probably they got a tip-off from the Biden people that this was coming, and to prepare the articles beforehand, so to speak, so that they could fast-track them out. It's another method by which the left likes to get out ahead of the news cycle. Will it work? I don't know. What effect will this have on the election? The problem with this particular aspect of the Hunter Biden email saga is that it doesn't appear to involve Joe Biden. It appears to involve Hunter Biden appearing naked on a Zoom call with an underage individual who spoke to a therapist about the situation or something, as is revealed in these emails. He's a creepy dude. Alludes to the fact that he wasn't allowed, I guess, to be around this person because there were fears that he would be like naked and on crack around an underage individual. Immediately, the Daily Beast damage control was, well, the Delaware AG there, because Giuliani turned this material over to the police, and they sent it into the AG there, and the AG sent it up to the FBI. They're saying, well, they punted it to the FBI, and the police talked about credibility issues. That's not actually what is being said. Even in the Daily Beast article, if you really read what they've said, it's that they pointed out that the credibility has to be judged and sent it to the FBI. If they believed there was a possibility that this material, pertinent to a potential federal case, was illegal, they would send it in to them. Now, of course, the FBI had this material and sat on it. I think that what happened is when the repair shop owner sent it in, they just assumed it was bullshit and never really checked the files. I think that in the future, regardless of what happens in the election, we're going to find corroboration that that was the case, and it's going to be another big oops moment with some middleman fall guy who totally failed to report in at some point what was going on, who will be canned and then behind the scenes get a nice big fat severance package. You've seen this before from the FBI. It's basically a vestigial organization at this point. By the way, as Razorfist has pointed out, the FBI was never meant to be permanent anyway. It dates to the gangland era when they were worried about mafia bootlegging and stuff like that. Well, that's not really a thing anymore. Why is there still an FBI? It's become a sacred cow. This tends to happen in highly bureaucratized, interventionist, left-leaning systems, which corporatism is. This allegation here, though, doesn't have anything to do with Joe Biden. Again, the only thing so far that I've seen in pertinent detail here that would worry me for electoral purposes really is the initial release, which says, hey, an attempt was made to set up a meeting between Joe Biden and an individual from this company that later he again leaned on the government there to fire a prosecutor who was gunning for them. The same company that his son was getting large sums of money for. You have emails to the effect that an attempt was made towards that. Now, the Biden camp says, well, the meeting never took place. It really doesn't matter, though. The fact that it was even a proposed idea that involved people in the Biden camp while he was a sitting vice president is goddamn damning. That is bigger than Watergate. Hunter Biden being so on crack that he didn't see the problem with being around, I guess the allegation is it was a 14-year-old, a relative or something, for whatever reason on a Zoom call or something, because he was high as balls. That's damning for Hunter Biden. It definitely doesn't reflect well on Joe Biden's upbringing of this particular child. Beau Biden, supposedly great guy, dies unfortunately of cancer because he was exposed to depleted uranium rounds. Very sad. He didn't apparently do anything wrong. But he's got this other kid here that he raised, I guess his last, blood relative, really. He's had a lot of personal tragedy, let's admit it, in his family with regards to people that he's been around. That being said, Biden knew of this behavior. He apparently would have been aware of this for a number of years. Appears not to have really involved himself with the behavior, and in fact remained involved in the business and fiscal sense with Hunter Biden while he was doing things like this. It doesn't speak good things about Joe Biden's judgment. Of course, that's for people like me. We would already question his judgment based solely on looking at his platform. Will this affect the voters? Will this, 11th hour October surprise continuation have a meaningful impact on the race? There is a new IBD poll that shows Biden systemically collapsing on the national level. It could be a fluke, but it seems to be beyond statistical probability that there isn't a decline there. The only thing I can think of that would account for that is the Hunter Biden release. The initial release, which was, many days ago, in this new poll that's taken place after. If the public has more distrust of Biden, you could see people who are basically like, before they were like, well, Trump's just the worst candidate, I'm riding with Biden even though I don't like the dude. Maybe now they dislike him more and aren't going to vote for him. And of course, it doesn't mean they vote for Trump. They could vote for Joe Jorgensen. They could vote for whoever the Green Party candidate is. Is Jill Stein running his third time a charm? She wants to get 500,000 votes this time instead of 430 or something. They could vote for Mickey Mouse. They don't necessarily vote for Trump. Just to be clear, there are a lot of people who won't vote for him. A lot of left-leaning independents, even if they sit it out and say, well, I can't vote for Biden in good conscience because I realize they acknowledge that he's got Alzheimer's, that he's scandal-ridden, that he's never accomplished anything in 50 years of being in government almost. That doesn't necessarily mean they cast the ballot for his opponent. A lot of people at that point, if they have like a party they prefer or an ideology they prefer but can't support the person representing these things, they'll just sit it out. They'll become a non-voter for the election. Of course, the Democrats are freaking out because they realize most Trump fans are gung-ho for him. His support level may only be in the mid-40s, which it is, like still around 44, but a very large proportion of those people will get out to the polls. With Biden, it's not so certain, and if he does suffer in the next week and a half, a significant decline in the polls, as you may begin to see, and polls tend to narrow in the last couple of weeks of the elections that we've had anyway, this is sort of a perennial thing by a few points, Trump could run away with it. Because at that point, Ohio and Georgia and Florida are all taken off of the table. Where is Biden going to get the votes? I mean, is he really going to look towards Texas? I think, didn't he suspend all campaigning in some of these states that supposedly he's a few points ahead in? Why would you do that? He keeps calling lid days. Another thing, I saw an article yesterday. It was actually about Harry Truman, and you'll remember, Harry Truman was basically written off. He was trailing in the polls consistently for months. His opponent decided to basically stop campaigning and say he's done. The newspapers were so sure that Truman would lose that they had the famous photograph where Truman has a shit-eating grin. He's holding up the paper that says, what was it, Dewey defeats Truman. Of course, they had printed it up the night before. That wasn't true. Truman actually won. And it was very funny, and it's one of the most iconic photographs of the 40s. That being said, that could happen. It could be that everyone writes Trump off, and then a differential in turnout throws half a dozen of these competitive states towards him and lets him win. He could win by a similar margin he won last time. Again, Minnesota technically is in play. This was the mistake that Hillary made. Hillary assumed she was going to win Wisconsin and didn't bother campaigning there. She assumed she was a point or two ahead in North Carolina. At the last minute, she was canceling fundraisers and rallies in the state. She would have won the election if she had just worked a little bit harder. I fully believe that. If she had bothered to go to the Rust Belt states, Michigan would not have flipped, Wisconsin would not have flipped, she probably could have grabbed North Carolina. That's the election. She would have gotten it. Biden is doing a small fraction of what Hillary did. He's usually making one rally a day to less than 100 people. That's not meaningful for driving up enthusiasm and turnout. He's basically riding on Trump being so disliked that he magically loses anyway. He's not disliked within the GOP. He's got more in-party support than Ronald Reagan did. Christ, Biden's people are insane to take such a risk. Again, Biden, if he was working harder, probably could win the election in a landslide. But he's not campaigning. And it looks like that's beginning to hurt him. And then you have this problem. And if it turns out, if it's corroborated, and the FBI is not going to do it, the FBI can't. The problem is the Daily Beast is like, well, we don't have any proof of these allegations. Yes, Giuliani is going to dump pictures of a naked 14-year-old, or a naked Hunter Biden talking to a 14-year-old, or underage photos or something online and go to federal prison. He's going to take one for the team in order to spread around a child. That's not going to happen, dude. That's insane. That would be insane, number one. Number two, it'd make him look worse than Hunter Biden does. But the allegation can be proven or disproven right now by the PD there in Delaware, or the AG, who again have punted it to the FBI, and that's rather telling that they would send it to the same group that ignored it in the first place. This material was already given to them by the repair shop owner before he had sent anything to Giuliani. He'd made a copy, sent the original off to the FBI, sent the copy to Giuliani's lawyer, And that's basically the timeline that we're seeing, knowing full well that the FBI would not investigate. Turns out that's the case. They didn't investigate. They're talking about credibility concerns. My goodness, you never would have called into question. I mean, I'm no respecter of persons, but let me make something clear. 5 years ago, none of these people would have questioned Giuliani's reliability in any legal matter. Not in 1,000 fucking million years would they have done that. It wasn't until he became buddy-buddy with Trump during the 2016 election and got on board the Trump train that they suddenly did a 180 and started talking about him being unreliable. He's a disinfo agent. He's a Russian shill. He was America's mayor during 9/11. You saying he was a Russian asset then too? Oh, they bought him afterwards. How many rubles did they have to pay him? He's pretty heavy-hitting. How much money did he have? Makes him give you fucking 8 figures probably just by going on a speaking tour. He's not going to be bought off by a bunch of fucking Kremlin assets. They did the same thing with Trump. They thought he was an upstanding guy in the 90s. They were like, he was sort of hip to the culture. He was sort of an MTV political mind at the time. The left tolerated him back then. They said, well, you know, he's still a rich bitch, but he's better than these other people because he was sort of hip to things, involved in wrestling and all this shit, pageantry, The Apprentice, Rosie O'Donnell, all of these other things. And it was fun, and they had no problem with him. Nobody ever called him a bigot. Maybe a womanizer. We knew about that. It was in every tabloid, and he didn't deny it. Other than that, though, they had no problem with him. It wasn't until he ran for office and the legacy media went completely apeshit. That's about all. Peace out.